Welcome everybody to our digital transformation series webinar. This webinar is going to be about empowering your workforce with Azure Virtual Desktop. You might hear us refer to it as AVDs going forward. That's just a little bit of shorthand, just because saying Azure Virtual Desktop about 400 times during this webinar is going to be a lot. So if we say AVD, that's what we're referring to. But welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us, and we're going to go ahead and begin. Some of you might have seen me on previous webinars, but just to reintroduce myself, my name is Robbie Swiebel. I am the Senior Director of Professional Services. I have been with MSPs for over 15 years now. My background is straight up engineering. I have built AVDs, I've deployed AVDs, I have fixed AVDs, I've done everything with AVDs. And then I have brought in our senior solutions architect, Victor Garcia, with us. Victor, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. How's it going, everybody? As Robbie said, my name is Victor Garcia, senior solutions architect here at Sourcepass. Coming up on my 4th year at Sourcepass, but I've been in the MSP world for almost 10 years now. Previously doing a lot of the engineering work, but now more on the scoping and solution side of things. So I've seen both sides of the table, and I've definitely worked with AVDs similar to Robbie's point.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you, Victor. So just to get a couple of good items out of the way, we're going to be continuing our digital transformation series of webinars. Be on the lookout every month for this series coming out. You'll see emails in your inbox with the topics, who's going to be discussing them, and more about every webinar series we have. This is considered our learning series, where we focus on educating users and maximizing our clients' investment in technology. So not only how do you deploy AVDs, but how do you use them to best suit your business going forward. Registration for all these events is very easy. You can go to sourcepass.com/events and sign up there. These are very knowledgeable series. I host quite a few of them, so it's always fun to see everybody returning. So just make sure you sign up for this continuing series. You'll see some upcoming events displayed here. We got our virtual event on June 11th about Microsoft 365, discussing some new updates and what's coming up. That'll be at 1:30 Eastern, and that is a virtual event, so right online. We also have an in-person event coming up, the Richmond Client Appreciation event, the Flying Squirrels versus Portland Sea Dogs. That will be on 7/22 at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. It's going to be at the Diamond, and you'll see the address right there in Richmond, Virginia. So if you're in the Richmond area, please stop on by. We'd love to see you and hang out with you and get to know you a little bit better in person. All right, just some webinar housekeeping. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A button right up at the top of this webinar. You can also use the chat. We'll be sure to monitor the chat and answer any questions you all have going forward, but really try to stick to the Q&A one. It's best for people to easily search it after the webinar, all the questions. And then after the webinar, we'll be sending out some feedback on today's session that really helps myself out, helps Victor out, helps Sourcepass out, just to see exactly what everybody got out of this and see maybe what we can change in the future to make these better for everybody. So make sure you go ahead and give us some feedback. Really helps us improve these webinars going forward. All right, just a quick key topics that we're going to be discussing today. It's going to be all about the Microsoft Cloud PCs. So when we say Cloud PCs, there's a couple of different distinctions in it. We're going to be discussing Windows 365. We're going to be discussing AVDs, kind of the similarities, the differences, when you would want to pick one over the other, and how to make the right decision for your business. Myself and Victor have had many discussions about many clients trying to figure out what their needs are, what best suits them, how do their end users interact with technology, what will make sense security-wise for your business going forward. These are all decisions myself and Victor make on the back end to make sure that we are providing the right solution to fit your company and your business. We'll talk about modernizing your workforce with secure access to desktop and apps on any device. That's kind of the really neat and fun feature of Windows 365 and AVDs in and of itself. You can really lock them down and secure the environment. environment. We'll differentiate between 365 and AVDs. We'll show you how to provision, scale, consolidate, suspend, and maintain a digital unified workplace. And then how to budget for AVDs and 365, because as everything with Microsoft, there is a cost. So it's always good that you incorporate the cost structure into your final solution to make sure that what you're going to be selecting, can also fit your business's budget as well going forward. So a lot of things to take into consideration when it comes to 365 or AVDs. And you'll just hear me and Victor kind of talk about some scenarios we came up with, some decisions that we made internally that helped some of our clients go forward in this decision as well. All right, we're going to be connecting your enterprise business to the Microsoft ecosystem. So the extension of 365 and AVDs is really a cloud PC. You got a full-blown desktop solution inside of the cloud. You don't need your hardware device. You just need it to connect to the cloud. Really helps clients begin their journey to the cloud. So maybe you're still on your legacy on-prem domain, you kind of want to give it a go. This is a really good step and first mark to getting inside of the cloud ecosystem and kind of understanding what it's all about. Will help you guys make that decision. How do we secure it? How do we build it? How do we support it? And how do we change it going forward? So not only do you build it and just walk away, but you can add more hosts to it if your business scales up. Say you go on a hiring binge and you hire 500 users, you can scale up your AVDs, you can scale up your Windows 365 to kind of keep up with the demands of your business as well. So we'll dive into a little bit of that going forward too. All right, so Victor, why don't you start us off?
Sure. All right, so modernize your workforce with secure access to their desktop and apps on any device at any time. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide. So virtualization addresses business needs. There are several things you need to take into consideration when making your decision. That's whether or not there's specific security requirements or regulation requirements. So let's say you're a part of financial services, healthcare, or government entities. Your workforce, whether it's an elastic workforce where you have many mergers and acquisitions or short-term employees, specific employee types. So if you have individuals with bring your own device scenarios and mobile devices, call centers, branch workers, or if there's specialized workloads such as designing and engineering, legacy applications, or software developers and testers.
Yeah, so that means like there's different business needs that we can address in different ways, right, Victor? I think we were talking before the call about one of our clients who has a remote workforce in the Philippines and what best suits them. So I think it really takes a good understanding of the company's needs, what their budget is, what they're trying to accomplish, and like what the right solution is. But I think in that scenario, it was pretty cool because the company was thinking about spinning up a remote workforce and trying to understand, what makes sense for them. Do you buy them all laptops and ship them out into the Philippines, or can you spin up AVDs? Bunch of different use cases that I think we can dive into, and this is just like some short examples of what that could look like.
Exactly that. And I want to add, although the cloud computing scenario is all relatively the same in terms of the outcome, the way that we provision these and decide what's best for your business is vastly different depending on what you guys are actually doing as a business. So to the example that Robbie's speaking of, there were some individuals who were working overseas. We were able to spin up Azure Virtual Desktops in a region that was geographically closer to those users. They were able to log in, access resources with low latency, and everything was a smooth transition for them. Obviously, that might not be the case for every scenario, but in that particular one, that worked. We were able to get it deployed, and everybody was up and running fairly quickly.
Ooh, good example. All right. So one cool thing about 365 and AVDs is it pipes you into the Microsoft ecosystem. And since you're in the Microsoft ecosystem, you have a great amount of control over what goes in and what goes out of that ecosystem. So when you spin up AVDs or Windows 365 PCs, you can lock them behind MFA. You apply your conditional access policies to them. So garden like who, where, what, why can access your virtual PCs. You can deploy Windows Defender. You can deploy your antivirus to these. You can put them all on a VNet, which means it's a virtual network inside of the cloud. So you can start applying your content filtering policies to these. So, yep, they're business oriented AVDs, but now you can start filtering out and making sure that nobody's going to gun websites, for example. You can really start layering in web controls in there. You know that it's all built on VNets and the Microsoft backbone. So infrastructure wise, it's pretty redundant. You can encrypt the data in there with any of your mail policies. You can apply DLP policies to them. You can set up Microsoft Sentinel and really start getting your logs going in and out of them. So I think one of the cool things about AVDs and Windows 365 is simply that fact is not only are they just in the cloud, but you can apply the whole host of Microsoft policies to them, right? Right, Victor?
Of course, and there's other services that you can integrate. So let's say that there's an organization that's very familiar with using Sonic Wall or Meraki firewalls. You can also apply those virtual appliances and tie that to your Azure Virtual Desktop and your virtual network. So there's the customization possibilities are there as well, and a certain level of granularity where you can go ahead, make configurations that work for you, and make sure traffic's getting routed through the proper channels, things of that nature. So it's very secure from that perspective.
Ooh. All right, so differentiate between Windows 365 and AVDs and which solution is the best for your company. So with AVDs, it's going to be a multi-session experience. It's the only way you can get a multi-session experience in Windows 10, and then now we should talk about Windows 11 since Windows 10 is end of life. But what multi-session means in this instance is it's one server, but tons of people can log into it. So if you're a little bit old school, you might think of like an RDS farm, so remote desktop farm, where it would be just a few different hosts, and then everybody logs into all those hosts. That's kind of the backbone and similarity that we're talking about. And it's really the only way that you're going to get a multi-session environment with Windows 11. They're all optimized for Office 365, so all of your apps will run pretty flawlessly. So Outlook, PowerPoint, Word, Excel, Teams. Teams actually has a very specialized optimization package for AVDs just because of how heavy Teams is to use in and of itself. But Microsoft actually created a specialized version of Teams just for AVDs in and of themselves. What's cool about AVDs too is once we build the back end of it, it kind of sits on a golden image. So kind of think of like a ISO of a server or your desktop, and that allows us to scale them up pretty rapidly. So again, like I said, you hired 100 people, you have no idea how you're going to get them equipment. What do? Go ahead and scale up some AVDs. So a really good example of kind of this scenario that we're running into is recently we did a project where we were migrating somebody out of an ecosystem that they were tied into. The client needed to have business continuity and experience very minimal downtime, even migrating their entire company out of this ecosystem. What we were able to do is we built the back end. We spun up, I think it was 25 AVDs at the end of it to house over 200 employees. We migrated that data right into the virtual network, virtual server. Everybody connected to it seamlessly through their AVD, and it allowed business continuity to flow. They never lost access to their data. They barely even knew that we did the migration because we were able to spin up the AVDs so quickly and allow them to access that data very, very quickly after the migration. So really, really cool example of the scalability of AVDs and allowed us to do the project for the client with very minimal disruptions and very minimal loss of service, because of the scalability of AVDs really came in handy there.
Yeah, I want to add one thing too. I think something important to take into consideration is um, you may have a pool of AVDs, right? So it might not be one individual virtual desktop that users are connecting to. You may have several that are leveraging connections across 20, 30 individuals. Doesn't matter which virtual desktop the users connect to, their data will travel with them from desktop to desktop. So it's similar to how an RDS session would work. They have their virtual hard drives that basically detach and reattach to their new session. So it's not like they're going to lose any data. The continuity will be there, and the experience will be as if they're connecting to the same desktop they were on the day prior.
Yeah, good call out. So now we'll dive into Windows 365 cloud PCs. They have a very specific use case, but what a 365 cloud PC is, it's an individual personalized computer just for a single user. So you give a license for whoever you're going to give the Windows 365 PC. You give them the license. We build up the back end. We build up the PC. Maybe you want it on the VNet. We'll attach it to the VNet. And this will allow each user to have their own unique individual session that they can spin up, log into, log off of, and go forward. Very specific use case. You probably aren't going to have a big ton of users with Windows 365 PCs. That's when you probably want to lean towards AVDs at that point, when you have tons and tons of users, because that's what AVD is designed for. Maybe you have, you just hired a frontline worker and you just have one of them, but you need them to access your company data. You just want one PC spun up for them, but you don't want to buy them equipment. That's when Windows 365 might be the right solution for you. We'll go into pricing later, but it's just about $30 to $50 depending on what you're getting a month for that user. So maybe you have a contractor and you don't want to buy them equipment, we can spin them up a Windows 365 PC just so you can have them access your data throughout the life of their contract and then spin it down once they're gone. So very specific use case. It does come in super handy, especially in that exact scenario that we've done before. That allows you to kind of expand your workforce very, very easily without the need to buy hardware.
Yep. And to add to Robbie's point, I think just the simplicity and being able to spin them up so quickly and kind of having a predictable monthly cost for budgeting purposes is one of the key benefits of Windows 365 versus AVDs. Now, obviously, we'll get into more details versus the differences, but that one to me jumps out the most.
Yeah, it's definitely one that we have done before. That's why it came off the top of my head. Cool. So, like we said before, AVDs on Windows 365, a huge advantage of it is it integrates seamlessly with the 365 ecosystem. Your IAM or identity access management can be really anything in the 365 ecosystem. You can attach them to your on-prem Active Directory. You can spin up Entra domain services connected to that. You can spin up and just have them connected to Entra ID and have them joined to Intune in and of itself. You get all the benefits of the Microsoft ecosystem. Just depends on where your company is at in the stage of their life cycle. So if you haven't migrated everything to the cloud, none of your computers are joined to Intune, that's no problem. We can still spin up AVDs and make them fit into your environment. Maybe you want to go towards Intune. Hey, no problem. Let's join these AVDs to Intune, start getting you on that process to get all your PCs joined to the cloud. Really cool, and because most companies are in 365 nowadays, it really allows you to expand your 365 footprint and get you a lot of control over the AVDs in 365.
Exactly. And since we're kind of on the topic of Intune and touching on that, essentially what Intune is going to be replacing is what your traditional like group policies would be doing, right? So you configure all of these profiles where you essentially assign them to specific users or device groups, and it deploys settings, applications. You could set up compliance requirements where a computer needs to be on a certain operating system version before it can access your company's data. So several really cool features that could be handled there, which again, it's essentially replacing what group policy previously did.
Yeah, and I think it's really cool the way Microsoft makes it kind of seamlessly compatible with both. So if you are on the journey, hey, do you want to do a hybrid join? So do you have Active Directory, but you want to take advantage of Intune features as well? We can go down that route as well. So
Mhm.
just being inside of the ecosystem, I think, really expands our possibilities of just what we can do with Windows 365 or AVDs.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So what's the kind of difference and features and benefits of 365 and AVDs, Victor?
So again, I think just the quick spin up time, the ease of management, and the cost budgeting, right? So you're kind of set on a fixed cost. You don't have to worry about maintaining virtual networks or specific images or things of that nature. And to Robbie's point mentioned earlier, you could spin it up quickly if you hire a temp employee, let's say, and you can deprovision it once they're done. Whereas for an Azure Virtual Desktop, there's some more backend provisioning and I'll call it IT management required. So you need to set up the virtual networks and all the services in Azure that kind of correspond to that. Now, once those are set up, obviously the provisioning and deallocation of virtual hosts is fairly simple. But again, there's a little bit more complexity on the ramp up period. But again, there's a lot of features that come as a benefit to kind of putting in that time to get that environment set up.
Yeah, it's kind of the whole like desktop experience versus server experience and like what kind of suits your business, right? So when we go into the pricing models, everybody will see, and especially I think you touched on it, Victor, of like W365 is a fixed cost. You know you're paying that license every month. AVDs is a very can be a very variable pricing model because you're being priced on consumption, right? So you can turn it up and turn it down, and you're only paying when it's turned up. So in the previous example, I said when we had a 20 AVD farm, there was 5 that were up 24/7 just because users were logging in, logging off all over the globe. So the times were a little bit weird, but all the 15 rest were like, hey, once the first 5 are full up, start spinning up more AVDs so more users can join. And that's kind of how you can control the pricing structure with AVDs. And what's cool about auto scaling is you can set the times that you want these to spin up. So maybe you're just 9 to 5. Cool. Let's set your auto scaling for just 9 to 5 if that's all you think your employees are gonna log in at. But maybe you do have those night owl employees that want to log in at 2 a.m. and get some work done. Just have one that's set 24/7. So it's a little bit more control over like the pricing when it comes to AVDs because you can kind of control when people are gonna log on and log off that suits your business well.
Yeah, and in addition to just like scheduled scaling, you can also set scaling based on like resource utilization, right? So let's say that one of the session hosts hits 80% utilization on its CPU. Azure is smart enough to now spin up an additional host to kind of start leveraging the connections that are coming in and taking some of the load off of that original one so that you're not going to have any issues with end users complaining about latency or, the PCs going slow. And then once, let's say that the utilization goes back down, Azure would be smart enough to deallocate that virtual machine. And again, you're not going to be charged for something that's off. A lot of times when we jump into client environments and kind of do some discovery work, I notice that they have everything set up nice and it's working great, but they're not looking to optimize their costs. They have the virtual machines running 24/7. And then they wonder why their Azure bill was, thousands of dollars. So we come in and kind of analyze areas where they can cut costs. And when we do new deployments, we obviously take all of that in consideration and work with you guys to make sure that it's going to be something that makes sense for you.
Yeah, and I think that's also a good time to kind of segue into the super technical bits of like from an IT management perspective, pooled AVDs is nice because maybe you're having a problem with just one of the hosts. I don't know, it got shut down somehow, right? You can start deallocating that host pool, wait for that server to not have any more users on it because they've now been allocated out. And you can log into that server and start doing what you need to and saying, hey, I am working on this server. There's a problem. Send my users to any of the other AVDs that we have out there. So I think from like the technical standpoint, that part's kind of cool too, is you can start directing users to maybe more non-problematic hosts, right?
Exactly. You have some maintenance time where you're really just not disruptive. You can be doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes that users really don't know about. And then when the issue is resolved, you start leveraging connections to that AVD again, they never know. It's
Yeah.
pretty seamless.
Cool. So W365 has kind of two different flavors that we will really deal with. It's going to be the Business Edition and the Enterprise Edition. Just like everything in Microsoft, there's generally the Business for sub 300, and then there's the Enterprise for 300 and up users. Some of the key differences are laid out in here. One of the cool things about the Business Edition is it doesn't need an Azure sub, whereas the Enterprise Edition does need an Azure sub to build to. The business one is very simple to deploy and manage. The Enterprise one does take a little bit more technical know-how in order to set them up, deploy them, and make them available. The Enterprise one, you do get a little bit more management control through the endpoint manager. You can see it joined right there into the endpoint manager window in admin center. But that's really the key major differences. Did I miss anything about business or enterprise, Victor?
No, you got it. I think the most important thing is the management through Intune and Endpoint Manager for enterprise. So going back to those policies that I kind of just touched on earlier, whether it's compliance, making sure antivirus is installed, things like that, you would need Windows 365 Enterprise if you wanted to leverage those capabilities.
Yeah, I think the user count's kind of the big one too. If you have less than 300 users, business is going to be what might be more suited to you. But even if you have less than 300 users, you can still use enterprise. It's just business caps out at 300. So if you have more than that, definitely not going to go down the business route.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So Victor, this is what you specialize in all day, every day. So Victor, how do I know what to choose when I'm picking these?
This is just an overall flow chart, I guess, kind of explaining what my day-to-day is like in terms of the conversations that I have with clients and how we make those distinctions on what makes the most sense. So I'm not going to go ahead and read exactly what it says here, but there's a lot of differences that can help dictate what what technology we decide to go for. So as we mentioned earlier, say you have frontline workers, they come in, they're working the front desk, they're temporary workers. Going with Windows 365 makes sense. Let's say you have a very strict budget requirement, right? And there's not any security or regulations that you need to follow. Windows 365 makes sense. Now, if you're in healthcare where you are accessing patient data or your financial services where you're accessing individual user data and you need more secure scenarios, right? That would definitely be an AVD situation where we could set up a virtual network. We can control access to that virtual network. We can set up firewalls in Azure to make sure that all of the traffic is being scanned, whether it's going out or it's coming in. So it really depends on what the business is doing. Sometimes AVD can be a bit overkill and you don't necessarily need that, but other times it's just right. So these conversations are all ones that we kind of take the time to have with each individual business. We ask the right questions and obviously answer any questions that they have. And in the end, we ultimately make a decision and work together to come up with a solution that works.
Cool. It's a very in-depth conversations. How long would you say is the normal quoting period for this? How long do you think it generally takes you to understand the needs and what the client is trying to do?
It depends. Obviously, we want to just speak with, point of contacts, business owners, just to get an idea of how they're leveraging technology. And then we usually do a deeper dive into what their existing, infrastructure is, whether it's on-premise servers or they're coming from another cloud platform or they don't have any servers or anything like that. So from start to finish, it could vary vastly, right? It could take a week, it could take a month. It all depends on what we find. I would say on average, a couple of weeks from start to finish to make sure that we have the proper solution scope. Obviously, we want to make sure we get a lot of the information we can up front so that when we do execute on these projects, our team has a smooth path forward. But yeah, it's a pretty involved process for sure.
Nice. It's not too bad, I would think. Couple of weeks, really understanding the requirements.
Yeah, of course.
This goes back to what you were saying. So when you do scope these out, a couple of things you're probably going to start asking for is, what kind of control do they need? Who's going to be accessing this? Do they have any safety requirements. So do they need to be HIPAA compliant? Do they need to be CMMC compliant? One that I know that we both worked with is, hey, do they use graphic intensive programs? Are what they're dealing with going to need a graphics processor attached to it? So I think what was the one we were using? The client was using AutoCAD, right? And we were like,
Mhm.
oh man, their experience is going to be really bad in these. How do we make sure that they have a server that can fit the heavy use of AutoCAD? And we were like, oh, we can get them a GPU, right?
Mhm. And another thing to add, like during the scoping process, obviously when we size these AVDs, let's say we're just talking about AVDs now, not Windows 365, so we've already kind of qualified them for Azure Virtual Desktop. Um, we're not just guessing, right? We're doing a lot of research and discovery in terms of what instance size makes the most sense, how many virtual CPUs, how much memory should the computer have, and we can kind of scale that up or down based on consumption. So we're not just setting something up and forgetting about it. We could set up alerting to see if it's being overutilized or if we maybe over provision something and we thought, they were going to need X amount of computing power, but they're only using 50%. So the scalability is crucial there. I think that's an important point to kind of hammer on.
Yeah, I think so too. But it's really cool that you can attach on GPUs in the event that they need it. So don't
Mhm.
think that just because you use like AutoCAD, this will never work for you. We got you covered, even if you use big programs like AutoCAD.
Yes.
All right, so let's dive into some provisioning, scalability, consolidation, suspend, and maintain a digital unified workspace. So we'll get a little bit techie on here on AVD side of the house. There's a couple of different ways that we deploy AVDs. Microsoft's kind of made it widely available. You can use the straight up Azure portal, so portal.azure.com. You can use Azure PowerShell. Make sure you install the right modules, and you can actually build it straight through PowerShell. You can do it straight in the Azure portal through the CLI, and you can do it through REST clients and API access. So if you have, there's a bunch of different programs out there that can help you across this journey. They all use API access into it. You can um, kind of monitor the resources with Azure Resource Manager. You can see what the usage is. You can see who's on what AVD. You can see what sessions have been going on for too long. You can see what sessions are stuck. So there's a bunch of different deployment methods out there. Me personally, I am a giant PowerShell nerd, so I enjoy all things PowerShell. I tend to lean on the PowerShell side, but I think most of our guides are also written in Azure Portal. I don't know, Victor, if you've ever actually used Azure CLI to deploy an AVD. Sounds a bit tough.
I've used it for certain things. The only issue, the portal changes fairly often, as with everything Microsoft. So if you're sticking with the CLI or PowerShell, you're probably going to have a more consistent deployment experience. But yeah, the portal is what a lot of the guys I know are definitely using, and it works just as good. So
Yeah, except when they change up all the buttons and you never know where anything is
you got
located because
to
you
relearn it
you
again real
just
quick.
deployed an AVD yesterday and now the portal's different today, you know?
Pretty much. Pretty much. Yeah.
Definitely have
All
come
too
across that.
familiar.
All right. So, as Victor and I were discussing, the AVDs do require a bit of backbone in Azure in order to build them up. So, you do need an Azure sub in order to do it. We can provision that sub for you. Your CSP can provision it. You can do direct bill. If you are a nonprofit, you actually do get allocated a certain amount of money towards an Azure spend. So that might be an avenue that you want to go down. But if you start doing that, you just need to make sure that your Azure subscription is correctly set up. You will need some sort of IAM, so identity access management, like I was saying, on-prem, legacy, Active Directory, Entra domain services, any type of IAM that you need to set up. then you need to actually build your golden image. You need to build your virtual network. You need to build your storage. You need to build your servers. Generally speaking, you might have your domain controller for on-prem legacy AD. You might have your app server to host any of the applications that you're going to be hosting. You might have a file server. Then you might have your entire host pool, which is all your VMs that people will log into for the AVD experience.
And this, the back end configuration obviously does not need to happen every time you want to provision a new virtual desktop. That is just like the preliminary foundational steps to make sure that you guys can move forward with that. So it's, although it's a lot of work up front, it's usually rock solid after you do it the first time.
Yeah. So I think you touched on this a little bit earlier, and this is something that I think both you and I discuss constantly. And it is, how do we know what the right size of AVD is for my users? As you can see through this table, this is pulled straight from the Microsoft articles. Microsoft's pretty stingy when it comes to the experience and what end users use AVD for. Most of the clients that we've deployed AVDs for fall into the heavy and power users. So they tend to use AVDs as full-blown desktop replacements, and they expect a full-blown desktop experience on it. So when you go that route and you start using Teams, you start using Outlook, you start using the entire Microsoft suite, you got 30 tabs open on your browser, Microsoft's going to consider you a power user, and you want to make sure that you actually get the right size of AVD, because Victor, what happens if you underscope an AVD?
Yeah, it wouldn't be a great experience. Like I said, there'll be some latency and some issues, which again we can adjust and resize on the fly, so it's not a huge overhead to do that. I want to just add, this chart is a chart that Microsoft had put out, and it states the maximum users per vCPU, and then if you look in the column over it, it's got just some random sizes. So let's just look at medium, for example, right? So if it's saying 4 users per vCPU and the computer's got 8 vCPUs, if you do the math, it's saying that you can have up to 32 connections on that virtual machine. I wouldn't recommend going to that. That is like the upper threshold. So when we size these, we'll leave room. So we'll maybe size it around 70% of what that would be, and then see if we need to scale up or down. So just wanted to call that out, because these numbers, although they are posted directly from Microsoft, you don't want to just automatically spin up and be at the max threshold of what the virtual machine can handle.
Yeah, and I think the to your point earlier, the scalability really comes into play here, because maybe you didn't know that you had an employee that's opening up 100 tabs a day, and they're just complaining, hey, my AVD is slow, my AVD is slow, my AVD is slow. It is not too big of a problem for us to go ahead, make sure all the users are logged out of the AVD, resize it to maybe a bigger size, and say, hey, go ahead and test this out tomorrow. Let us know if you experience any of the same issues.
Yeah, and if you do have those users, right, where let's say you've determined that you need Azure Virtual Desktop because of the way of your compliance or whatever the case may be, and you have specific power users, we could set up single personal AVDs. So it's personal and pooled. Obviously, the personal is going to be a little bit more costly because it's one virtual machine per user. But those options are available as well. So if you have developers or people doing AutoCAD stuff, to Robbie's point, the personal AVDs may be the right solution. But yeah, there's options there for you.
Yeah, so now the 365 enterprise deployment process, a little bit simpler. You don't need all of the resources, but you can. So AVD 365 enterprise, like we said, requires an Azure sub, still requires some sort of IAM to it. So how are people going to access it? Does require the license. And then what step 4 is like, you can attach it to your VNet on the back end and do all your content filtering and whatever you needed that way. But you don't have to. They don't have to live on a VNet. You can just spin them out, have them free access to the web, because that's what you needed. So a little bit of a less effort, I would say, on the Windows 365 route. but still not like just click a button and it's up, right?
Agreed.
Cool. So I think this is where I think we have so many questions back and forth between you and me, not just on 365 license requirements, but Microsoft licensing in general. Just a couple of quick points. Users with Pro endpoints require a W11 E3, EMS E3, or M365 F3 E3, E5 BP. I don't really want to go read this entire list because, man, I could go on about Microsoft licensing for days. Is there any special call outs you think we need to know, Victor?
Not necessarily. I mean, to your point, is it worth diving into the licensing because they're so often changing the names of the SKUs and what's required. So, although it's obviously important to know what licenses are needed, that information is always readily available, and we can assist with that and make sure that everything is procured and ready to go. So, yeah, I don't think that we need to specify each individual SKU.
So this, I think, is the big point that we were making earlier is W365 is a flat cost and it's a per user cost because you're just getting the licensing for it. So there's the basic, there's the standard, and there's the premium. And again, as you can see in our example here, this is just the enterprise that we're looking at. But you can range from $31 per user per month all the way to $66 per user per month, depending on their workload and what you're trying to accomplish here.
Yep. And the premium is for more power users. You could see it kind of shows there's more resources allocated for that cloud PC when you get it provisioned.
Yep. And then just like you were saying, this is a good chart here that can kind of give you a good basis of like what you think you're going to need to support your users going forward. So you can kind of see that once you start opening up the big Microsoft suite to it and using more and more and more and more, you're going to need a bigger, beefier machine on the back end to kind of take over what you're doing. So I think you were saying earlier, like engineers and content creators, man, they're going to want a bigger, beefier experience. Otherwise, we're just going to hear, hey, my machine's slow, my machine's slow, my machine's slow, my machine's slow,
Yeah, even important to note the load of just using Office applications. I think a lot of people assume that they're relatively lightweight, but when you've got Excel open or Access and Outlook and PowerPoint, it does kind of consume resources. So definitely important to take that into consideration when sizing.
Yeah, I think even my physical machine starts to struggle when I have about 30 Excel documents open,
And start ramping up. Yeah.
But that also brings up a good point. We not only are deploying these for our clients, but we also have an internal use over at Sourcepass for AVDs and W365 as well. Maybe we need a contractor for a specific project that we have because we just don't have the skill set in there. We spin up AVDs and W365 for our own resources here at Sourcepass as well. So it's really nice that like not only do we sell these to our clients, but we also take advantage of them internally to kind of fit our needs as well. So it is nice to have our own use case for it inside of Sourcepass,
Yeah, and for those scenarios where you might need like a third-party vendor or someone to gain access to your environment, AVDs in Azure is really good at utilizing what's called role-based access controls. So you can really determine what they have access to in terms of resources. So you don't have to worry about opening up your whole environment, putting it at risk for stuff that they shouldn't be seeing. You can lock it down and almost containerize it in a sense for those individual users and the resources allocated for them.
Yeah, and I think to touch back as we keep talking about frontline workers, but it really is a good use case for W365. You don't want to keep buying laptops every time you have a summer intern come to your office. You want to really just be able to spin them up and spin them down very, very quickly.
And the licensing for Frontlines is a bit different as well. So a license for Windows 365 Frontline grants spins up 3 different PCs, but only one user can be logged in at a time. So that's where like the shift worker scenario makes sense, right? If you have somebody who comes in from 9 to 5 and then from 5 to 12, let's just say, making up examples, you can use that one license to cover both of those users, where they'll still have their own individual Windows 365 desktop that they log into, and you won't have to worry about them kind of using it at the same time and eating up that license seat because of their difference in shifts. So another way to kind of monitor and manage costs if you want to go that route.
And then to circle on, you knew it was coming. Budget AVDs and Windows 365 costs. So everybody wants to know how much is everything. So when we calculate pricings for AVD, you need to remember there's no charge per user. It is a monthly Azure spend based upon usage. And that is also needed to include the backbone too. So there is a monthly cost for the VNets that you build up. There's a monthly cost for the hard drives that you have attached to it. Generally, when we spin up AVDs, we host all the profiles in Azure files. So we build up a storage account that'll host all the profile disks for those AVDs. So there are other costs associated with AVDs. That's not just the server. So you always want to take that into account. And we'll go and see what that looks like. For Microsoft licensing, this is going to be for W365. You can get the AVD access if you have certain licenses. So, Victor, what are the licenses that me and my employees need if I do go the AVD route?
So these are the ones listed right here, whether you're using an enterprise suite option, so Microsoft 365 E3 or E5, you can go A3, A5, or student use. You can go with faculty, which is F3. Business Premium is what we typically recommend because that kind of covers the whole suite of what we like to offer here at Sourcepass. But you could also use the Windows 10 or 11 Enterprise E3, E5, Education A3, A5, or the Windows 10, 11 VDA per user. Again, we're big on business premium here because it covers everything, but not to say you're locked in and have to use that license SKU.
Victor, is there something that I can do if I have an AVD that I know is going to be around for a while? Is there some sort of discount I can acquire if I know that I'm going to have these servers around for a while?
Yeah, so Microsoft offers what's called reserved instances. They do 1 year and 3 year. And what that basically is you are saying we are going to hold on to this instance of this AVD for the predetermined length of time. And in doing so, you're getting up to, I think it's 72% cost savings if you go with the 3 year reserved instance. So if you're an organization that knows, listen, we're going to move to AVD and we see this being the future of our organization and our IT footprint, it makes sense to go that route instead of having to worry about the monthly costs and potentially going up a ton of money. You're usually locked in at a pretty good rate with the reserved instance.
Yeah, and what's cool about RIs too is that they're based on 24/7 usage. So if you do go the RI route, you don't need to worry about auto scaling anymore because you're saying, hey, Microsoft, don't worry about it. I'm going to have this server for a year or 3 years, whichever one you buy. And Microsoft's going to make the assumption that that server is going to be on 24/7 and really give you a discount on it. So if you're really interested in sticking around with AVDs, RIs might be a good route. I think one kind of use case we do here that I have seen us do is the client didn't know. They wanted to see and test it out, right? So we built them the AVD, had them use it around, and after 6 months, they came back and were like, hey, this is really cool. We really like these AVDs. We really think our business is going to use these going forward. Now let's talk about RIs. So it's not something you need to do right up front. You know, the client tested it around, made sure it fit their business, and then we discussed buying some RIs just to make their Azure footprint a lot cheaper too, you know?
Yeah, and not every virtual machine that you host in Azure needs to be a reserved instance or a pay-as-you-go model. You can mix and match. So let's say that you have a domain controller in Azure that stays on 24/7 and you have 5 virtual desktops that need access to that domain controller. You could still go pay-as-you-go model on the virtual desktops and do the auto scaling and scaling plans we discussed earlier, and then do the reserved instance for that one domain controller that you know is it's not going offline, right? So you're not going to scale it off and on at specific times. So definitely a specific approach to take when looking at the reserved instances versus pay as you go and what makes the most sense.
So, next steps to talk about. If you ever want to hear more about AVDs, Windows 365, you can go to our MCOE, which is sourcepassmcoe.com/sales. You can reach out to your account manager and they can go ahead and submit a solutions ticket in. If you want to email me or Victor, we'll be glad to answer any of your questions as well. All different ways if you want to get more information about this. We'll be sending this out as well. There's a lot of relevant Microsoft articles about this. There are specific, even learn paths in Microsoft specifically geared towards AVDs and Azure usage in general. Reminds me, I think I need to renew my AZ340, but it is a lot of documentation to go over, and a lot of good benefits to get you all the resources that you need. Let's do some Q&A. I think there's some questions in the chat, Victor.
I don't know if I saw any questions in chat. Is there any in Q&A?
So I see one in Q&A. They're asking if they have Citrix or VMware Horizons right now. Can they migrate those to AVDs?
So yeah, that's a lot of the times we see scenarios exactly like that, where a client has on-prem infrastructure running either Citrix or VMware, and we do exactly that. We migrate the entire workload into Azure, set up AVDs, make sure that if you have app servers or file servers, whatever you need, we recreate that in Azure essentially, and then as part of it, we'll make sure that we kind of moonlight the on-prem infrastructure or wherever you guys are coming from. We decommission that so that you're not getting billed for both instances. But that's a lot of the time the move that we see is coming from platforms like that into Azure.
So already have a cloud footprint, just want to move everything to Azure. I mean, it makes sense to keep if you're already in the Microsoft ecosystem, having your entire business based out of it, like we said earlier, really gives you all the advantages of the Microsoft ecosystem. So I think it's a really good decision for businesses to make,
Yeah, definitely. Especially if when you have on-premise hardware, right? You have to re-up that every so often, right? Every 5-10 years, whatever the life cycle is. But with Azure, you're getting the monthly cost, but you know that the hardware you're getting is top of the line. So it's kind of a peace of mind where you don't have to worry about that.
What's also cool, speaking about peace of mind, and there's a question in chat about Windows 10 going end of life. Victor, is there any special things you get by end of life operating systems and hosting them in Azure?
You get extended support. I forget exactly how long it is, but that's definitely one of the benefits. We've seen clients take account of that and kind of utilize that already. So
Yeah, so I know everybody's worried about Windows 10 going end of life in October. Not too big of a threat if your AVDs are on Windows 10 currently. Microsoft does do special update release packages for any operating systems hosted in the Azure platform. So Microsoft says, hey, if your servers are in Azure, we're going to go ahead and extend your support for you. So you get a little bit of bonus features for it, and you can kind of extend the life of your operating system. So it's a very cool thing to take advantage of if your footprint's already in Azure.
yes, added security for sure.
Cool. And that is the end of our webinar. Thanks everybody for joining. Again, I am Robbie Swiebel, Senior Director of Professional Services. I'm here today with my partner, Victor Garcia, our Senior Solutions Architect. If you ever want to hear more from us, go ahead and reach out to your account manager, and everybody will be getting you with us, and we'll be able to answer any questions.
Thanks,
Cool.
everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good one.